After a long night of shooting the aurora on the Dempster Highway on September 9th, I decided to head back down towards Whitehorse in the south the following day in search of clear skies as more rain was moving in from the north. 6 hours to Whitehorse. I'm saying goodbye to Dawson City, Tombstone and the Dempster. Heading south. It's supposed to rain most of the day tomorrow and tonight up there, so forget that. Not sure how much it's supposed to rain on the way to Whitehorse, but I think I'm going to run into a lot of delays, especially this big one before I get to Carmack. Finally back across the river on my way to Carmack. Some nice clouds in front of me, some sun hitting the trees. Another beautiful day. Beautiful day. Alright, so I'm going to go back to Carmack's and just go to that overlook and just hang out. Because I don't have anywhere to go. There's still a hole above Dawson City. And if it stays that way or gets better, I think I'll keep going north. If it fills in and looks stupid, then I'll just camp there for the night or something. After catching up on my sleep in Whitehorse, I took off on September 11th without a clear idea of where I was headed since my weather apps all seemed to be contradicting themselves. I headed back north to the town of Carmack as at least one weather model was forecasting a break in the clouds overnight, and it appeared that it would be happening somewhere between Carmack and Dawson City. After arriving in Carmack, I decided to stick around as this was now my only option for getting another shot at the aurora. One of my favorite spots near Carmack was the Five Fingers Overlook, which was located near a beautiful bend in the Yukon River. After deciding to stick around, I now had several hours to kill before the sky grew dark, so I set off to explore. I headed up Highway 4 along the Yukon River to Little Salmon Lake in hopes of finding more potential mountain reflection shots, but I couldn't find a good angle and I was running pretty low on gas, so I turned around and headed back. I spotted a pullout on my way there which looked like it had a nice overlook of the Yukon River. The fall colors in this area were approaching peak and the view from the overlook was stunning. I spent the rest of the afternoon there, catching up online, eating dinner, and looking at the weather. The break in the clouds was still shrinking, and now it looked like I might not see the aurora at all. At 11 p.m., I headed out into the darkness, even though the KP index was only a 4 and my apps showed that it was completely clouded over. But as soon as I stepped outside, I saw stars overhead. I quickly set up my tripod to take some long exposure shots just to double check and see if any hint of the aurora was in the sky. And what I saw next is a good example of why you should always at least look outside if you're in the Yukon with a mediocre KP and all your apps are telling you it'd be a waste of time. The ridge behind me was completely lit up by the aurora and the clouds, for the moment, had disappeared. I had given up for the night and was actually on my way to bed, but now that the aurora was going off, I had to improvise in a hurry. Panicking because I didn't really have a good option for this area, I headed first to an overlook off of Highway 4 and froze my butt off for about an hour before the aurora began to lose steam and fade while more clouds blew in from the north. I was thinking about calling it a night, but I saw a bit more activity going off over my shoulder behind the ridge towards the west. I decided to bail on my spot and instead headed back to the Five Fingers Overlook, set up the tripod, and started shooting. 12. Could be wrong. Clouds finally showed up. It's raining. It may be socked in all day. If so, I'm going to go back down south. I got to get gas. That's my first thing I needed to do. Tried to get gas last night, and nothing was automated in this whole town, which happens a lot in the Yukon. So I'm going to go try to get some gas, and then head south, maybe back down to Whitehorse, and from there I'll try and find a place to go tonight. I spent the next day waiting for the weather to clear while I continued to explore the area around Carmack's. At 10 p.m. I headed to a lake off of the Klondike Highway as the KP index popped back up to a 6. I was taking out my tripod and I was about to set up next to the lake when I glanced down and noticed a huge bear print in the wet mud right next to my van. I actually had to sit in the van and think about it for a few seconds before giving up on the idea, since I wasn't looking forward to shooting in the dark with a large bear sitting in the bushes behind me. I headed back up to another overlook off the Klondike Highway, and again, the sky completely lit up. But my luck finally ran out as the next storm blew in just before I started shooting, and I lost the aurora behind the clouds. On Friday the 13th, my weather apps were telling me that there would be a breaking storm over the Chugach Mountains in southern Alaska, and since more clouds were due to roll in over the Yukon, it was time to head west. I punched in directions for Glen Ellen and set off on an 11-hour drive that would cover 992 kilometers back down to Whitehorse and then out on the Alcan Highway. About 5:30, 5:40 something. On Saturday the 14th, out on a misty Highway 1. I set off early the next morning in hopes of catching some good light off of Highway 1 between Glacier View and Eureka Roadhouse. I was hoping to get some shots of the Chugach Mountains in the early morning light, but they were blocked by an inversion layer as the storm cleared from the valley. I was bummed about the low clouds covering the road until I remembered I had my drone with me. I put the drone in the air, and suddenly the morning looked spectacular. After spending the morning shooting the area around Glacier View, the clouds began to move in again, and by mid-afternoon, it was raining again. I headed to my Airbnb in Palmer to try to figure out the next couple of days. Leaving my Airbnb just to go to Subway outside of Palmer. I'm on my way to the Subway in Palmer. And my Jackery died because I left the Starlink going, which was not a good idea. Anyway, I'm going to try to find a hole in the clouds tonight down in the Kenai Peninsula. Lots of clouds around, so we'll see if that happens. And then I'm not sure when I'm going to leave. Got to figure that out tomorrow, between tomorrow and Tuesday. I might just start rolling out tomorrow. If I can find more things to shoot. I hate leaving the Chugach area, but it's just cloudy. It just looks cloudy all week again, just like last year. On the evening of September 15th, I headed down to the Kenai Peninsula as there looked like there might be a gap in the clouds for a short period of time. The KP index was on its way up to a 7, which was the highest I had ever seen while out shooting. It was raining again as I made the long drive south, and I was distracted for another half hour or so as the sun burst out from behind the clouds right before setting, lighting up everything along the Nick River. As I drew closer to the Kenai Peninsula, I got a bit nervous as a full moon rose in the east. Most of the activity over the past few days had been in the eastern sky, and I had a bad feeling that the aurora would be lost behind one of the brightest full moons I had seen in some time. When I finally went to set up a shot at midnight, it became clear that I wouldn't be getting any decent photos of the aurora that night, even with a KP of 7. The bright moonlight washed the aurora from the sky, and while I was still shaking my fist at the moon, the clouds moved in again, and this time, it looked like the rain was here to stay. I made the long drive back to Palmer and got to bed around 3 a.m. I'm heading out of Palmer Monday the 16th. Didn't get a lot of sleep last night. Got back to the house around 3:15, Airbnb. Got about 4 hours of sleep-ish. And now it's about 9:20. And I am heading make it that far. I'm just going to kind of take it in stages, sleep along the way. Just non-stop storms coming in again to this corner of Alaska. I just can't catch a break. So, about 3 hours to Glen Allen. From there to talk, and then over the border and just see where I land tonight. After 2.5 weeks of heading north and exploring the Yukon and Alaska, it was finally time to start heading home. The forecast was calling for a solid week of rain, and I was already running behind as I was only going to have a few days back at home before setting off on my next adventure in Europe. The trouble was, home was now 3,600 miles away, and it was going to take several days to get there. But I did make a couple of stops on my way back out, driving along the amazing Matanuska River. On the way home, I had one more amazing night with the aurora before heading further south into the Canadian Rockies, Glacier National Park, and finally, home. All of those locations are coming up in my final Into the Yukon episode, so if you'd like to see what happens next, please feel free to subscribe and ring that notification bell. Before ending this episode, here are a few shots from my quick trip over the border into Alaska.